Hello and welcome to the replay. I'm Jason Butler and thank you for joining me on tonight's live. Tonight I'm going to be speaking all about self-employment and financial planning, or rather financial planning when you're self-employed, because there are some pitfalls, there are some opportunities, there's some highs and there's some lows. And I know quite a lot about this because I first went self-employed when I was not just coming up to 21. So that's just over 30 years ago. So I know what it's like to be self-employed, and hopefully I can share with you what I've learned, but also some of the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. Now, as I say, let me just pin the comment here. I always have to do this at the beginning. Make sure that I can get this on here. See if I can do this. There we go, and I can pin that. Marvelous. I'm rocking. Hello, Tennis for Teddington. Nice to see you. Tall Bar, good to see you there as well. So I'm just going to be talking about everything and anything about self-employment and financial planning. So if you've got a question, put it in the box, ask me. I'm happy to try and get to it, but I just want to cover what I call the core four areas are. So my first question really is, why are you self-employed? And by self-employed, I mean Schedule D. You are earning all the money yourself, as opposed to a limited company. I will touch on some aspects of a limited company, but this is really about people who are sort of Schedule D. But some of the aspects I talk about are very relevant for single person companies, all right? I'll come back to your question in a minute, Tennis for Teddington. Very good question. Keep them coming. I will get back to them all in a minute. Hi, Mabel's Gold. Good to see you. Hello, Peter. Good to see you. Manny Ray. Good to see you. God, we got some good old faithfuls here coming back. Good. So yeah, my question is, why are you self-employed? Whether that's Schedule D or you've got your own limited company, it's for all of us, it's different, right? Sometimes it could be just because no one will employ you. That was the case with me. Or it could be just that's how your business works. If you're a plumber or an electrician and you don't work for a big company, it's just how you work. Or it may be just a necessity for you that, you've started a side hustle, you don't have a job or you didn't have a job. Or it could be in addition to your job. Because quite a lot of people, I get income from all different sources. I work for people, I'm an employee for someone, I'm self-employed. So we often, in the new world, it's not quite as simple as, the job that we have full time. I joke to my daughter Daisy that neither her or I could ever work for one customer or one employer or one person because we haven't got the time. Couldn't give them all our time. So there's lots of different reasons, but some people have an entrepreneurial seizure. What they essentially do is they basically wake up one day and think, oh, it's all about control, I want to do my own thing. So whatever your reason for being in business, that's fine, but it's really important to understand. Now, the corollary of that is, do you own a job or do you own a business? And there's a very big difference. Nothing wrong with either. But if you own a job, then what you do with the money you earn will determine whether you build wealth. If you're building a business, you still need to be paid a fair wage, and you still need to make sure that you've got enough coming in and that the business is paying the fair cost of your labour. But you may be building up something that you can sell, like I have a few times. So I have built up businesses and sold them, as well as being paid a good wage along the way. I got paid for selling the future income stream. So it's very important to understand that. And the danger, if you keep building something and you're going to have a big payoff at some stage in the future, the danger is that doesn't happen and you don't put money aside, you've got no money built and saved, and you're relying on the big payoff, and that's a problem. Equally, if you drain your business of all the money that's coming in and never reinvest in marketing and automation, in support, in technology, then your business won't grow and reach its full potential, or you'll just be working very, very hard. So just bear that in mind. So I thought I'd just touch on a few things on, basically, we'll go through this. So I'm going to answer that question, Tennis for Teddington, that you asked about pension. Do put your questions in the question box. I'm going to get to as many of them as I can. If it's, we'll go as long as we need to cover those. So I wanted to talk about 4 key areas, right? Cash flow, insurance, tax, and pensions. Now, I'm just going to touch the big picture of this and just give you a few different perspectives to help you think about it. So here's the thing. A lot of people say to me, Jason, I find it very difficult if I'm self-employed, whether that's Schedule D or I've got my own little company that I'm running, to budget because my money is very irregular. And I understand that. My money is irregular in some forms. Sometimes I get high book sales, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get lots of bookings, sometimes I don't. It just varies, and that's just the way of the world. So what you have to do when you're self-employed or you're working for yourself is you have to budget your money. You have to create your spending plan. If you've seen my 8 money milestones, the smart spending system is my spending plan. You have to have a spending plan for your personal life and the business that supports it that's based on your worst monthly income. So if your income, so let's say, oscillates between 2,000 and 4,000, you base your lifestyle on your 2,000. I know it sounds hard, but that's what you have to do. And the months that you get more than the 2, then that's the extra, and you can readjust your budget that month and decide where you want that money to go. But if you build your lifestyle and your mortgage and all your running costs on the basis of the best month, when I was a financial advisor, I used to act for some barristers, and they were train wrecks because they would spend the money when they signed the client up, spend the money when they'd finished the job, and then spend the money when they got paid for the job. I mean, they were a train wreck. So always live according to the lowest possible month or lowest possible year. Now, so that's the best way to approach it. And here's the other thing. Normally, you would have an emergency reserve, which is one of the milestones, of between 3 to 6 months expenses. But if you're self-employed, like I am, that's why I like to have 12 months core essential living costs. And that for me means that I can ride out the ups and the downs, and I don't feel uncomfortable if no one wants to hire me or the work doesn't come in or I can't get out or I'm ill. It's no big issue. Now, you may not be able to have 12 months expenses in your emergency fund straight away, but you certainly want to probably think to get to nearer to 6 months than the 3 months because you've got this variable income. So as well as holding your living costs down to the average of the low end of your income rather than the best end, also making sure you've got slightly more in that emergency reserve. Or you could have a smoothing account. So in the good months, you can put the good months' money into a separate reserve account in your business or personal life, and then just draw that back to ease out the cash flow. So if your lifestyle costs are $3,000 a month, 1 month you get 2 in the business, 1 month you get 4, use a smoothing account in the business to help you cash flow it. But you have to be intentional about this. And it will take you some months to get used to this. And even if you've tried this before and it didn't work, it's just because you didn't find the right way to work it. Just because it didn't work before doesn't mean you're wrong. Okay, you just got to keep on going. So a smoothing account in the business, or to oscillate that, to vary that variable income, to put that money and smooth it out, or a higher personal cash reserves to help you sort of supplement your income for those months when it's a bit dry. So that's what I would do. And another thing that I do, which is really simple, now I have a VAT registered business, you may not do, but I always account for whatever the VAT. So say I charge someone £1,000 and it's £1,000 plus VAT is 200 quid. When that invoice gets paid, automatically when it gets paid, the £200 goes into the VAT reserve and the 1,000 stays in the trading account. Now, because we are also buying supplies that have VAT on them, we're never going to pay all of that money over each quarter to the Inland Revenue. So say our VAT that quarter is, let's say, 20 grand, right? And I might have spent out 5 grand on other stuff. So I've got to pay the Inland Revenue 15 grand. But I still account for the 20,000 until the bookkeeper says, this is the amount, we don't touch that money. So each quarter, we normally have what we call a little bit of money coming back to us. But as we go, we're budgeting for the VAT on a cash basis. And the other thing is also for your income tax. So as a rough rule of thumb, if you're not earning sort of more than 50, 60,000, or certainly if you're not earning more than 60,000, putting aside about 20% of what's coming in as income tax, we won't cover it all, but it will cover the vast majority of it. And when I got into a pickle in my early 20s, part of the money that I owed, unsecured, was income tax. So because as it came in, I used it. I didn't think about the income tax. Then they had to interview me and they said to me, if you don't pay us this, we're going to send you to prison. So that was a wake-up call. And I believe you me, when you've sat in an office with the Inland Revenue with some bloke with a pencil moustache telling you he's going to send you to prison, it's very, very sobering and it wakes you up. And I did say to the guy, this is Mr. Inland Revenue, this is not a won't pay, this is I can't pay. And what I'm going to do is offer you special terms and I'm going to pay you, but on my terms. And he said, we're not a bank, Mr. Butler. I said, well, you are now. So that's a funny story when I was 24. But don't do that. So I always put aside my income tax if I've got income tax to pay. I'm putting aside about 20%. But when you start earning big money, if you're earning 6 figures, then you probably need to be putting aside a third to about a third of your money, 30 to 35% as income tax. Okay, it's just that discipline of doing it, so you don't think it's there to spend. So the VAT gets put aside, regardless of any reclaim that we get, and our income tax is either at 20% if we're earning under 60 grand, or it's about 35% if we're starting to earn the bigger money nearer to the 100 grand, because you start losing your personal allowance when you go over 100,000 quid. And you need a proper budget. So just as you need a spending plan, I don't like the word budget, but you need a spending plan for your personal affairs, you also need one for your business. So I use a system, an online software system called Xero. Xero has a budgeting facility. I have a lovely lady called Angela, who I've never ever met, who does all my bookkeeping. She goes in, she does all the ledgers. When I've got my expenditures, when I pay for stuff, I just do it on my phone. It goes in and it's an expense. She deals with everything. She posts all the ledgers, everything's done, and she tells me the VAT that's going to be paid. It's all done on direct debit. She files it all. But the budget, we're checking against the budget in Xero, and we're checking the cash situation in Xero. Everything's done in Xero. So you need a really good, sensible accounting package, and as I say, try and avoid any bits of paper. So I don't have any paper. If I go and buy something or I want to reclaim something, it goes straight in the phone. And you do need a good bookkeeper. So a good bookkeeper doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. I've got 3 businesses I'm running, and my lady charges me £130 a month. And that's 3 different businesses, 3 VAT entities. So, they're worth their weight in gold. So a good bookkeeper and a good bookkeeping system, together with a sensible business budget that aligns with your personal budget, it is a bit of work. I'm sorry, it's not exciting, it's boring, but it's necessary for you to get ahead and win. Now, I'm super creative, okay, and I love reading, and I hate all the budgeting. I always have done. But I do it because it keeps me on the straight and narrow, and it gives me that peace when I go to sleep at night. I'm not worrying, okay? So, you just have to learn to do this. So that's cash flow, right? So, just a couple more things on cash flow. I just should mention this. People talk about debt, don't they, in businesses? Well, debt is a no-no. So no credit cards, no overdraft, no bank loans, no cars on hire purchase, no computers on purchase. And do you know why? Because the pain of paying out of your account, either on a bank transfer or internet banking or debit card, you really think carefully about it. You really think. And here's the thing. By saving up to buy the kit that you need, we buy all our phones, we buy them outright, we buy all our computers outright, nothing on finance at all. The money's in the account. When the account gets a bit low, do you know what? I start hustling. I think, I've got to pull my finger out and build that back up again. But when it's on credit cards and when you've got loans and overdrafts, it all becomes too easy to spend money that you don't have, or you think you're spending in advance of what you think is coming in next month. But if you only spend what you've got, and here's the interesting thing, if you think you can't save in your business account or even personally, then you certainly can't afford monthly payments on credit agreements. Okay? So if you can't afford to save each month, you cannot afford monthly credit agreements. And credit cards, company credit cards are a no-no, definitely. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but that's the way it is. And here's the other thing about businesses, that we're always in some hurry to build our business quickly, all right? So I've been on Instagram for several months now, and I don't know, we've got 800 followers. That's great, right? I'm not crying in my beer that I haven't got 80,000. It'd be nice, but it doesn't really make any odds. We're quite happy to just carry on and be careful and deliberate, be consistent, because I know what I'm talking about, and I've been there and I've seen it, and I'm credible. And the reason why I'm prepared to take my time is because I know anything worth having takes time. And the same in your business is that with your business, you've got to get a compromise between moving forward at a sensible level and not actually getting ahead. You with me? So you've got to get the growth, but you don't have to do it all overnight. And I think some people are so obsessed about paying for courses, buying new kit, some big swanky computer system, new tools, whatever it is. Now look, we buy kit, we've got cameras, we've just bought a new camera for 700 quid. We've just bought a new mic for 120. Not because we thought it was we just want to burn our money, we got to have it. We thought it through carefully, and we've decided that actually we need to invest in that to improve our content, okay? So we got to a stage in my content business, content business has been going for, one way or another for about 2.5 years in its current form. No, about 2 years actually in its current form. And we're now starting to get clearer as to what we want. Sometimes we're investing doing the website. Sometimes we're doing a new automation in the newsletter. So the key is you slow and steady with no debt and deliberate and careful and building on it and being consistent is the thing that's going to help you get ahead. As I say, just avoiding debt. Now, let's talk about insurance. And this is something which I think people aren't always aware of. They forget about insurance. Your biggest insurance in a business is your emergency fund, okay? Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, there is a lot of pressure on social media to grow quickly. No, yeah, as you say, just forget them. Don't judge yourself according to other people. Thanks for that, Tamsin. There is a lot of pressure, but you don't care what other people are doing. All you've got to do is focus on what you do, okay, with a business, which means you're debt-free, you've got control of your expenses, you're living according to your worth or your lowest end of your earnings, you've got some control over the cash flow, you've got a decent bookkeeper, you understand where the money's coming from. We'll come back to marketing and stuff in a minute, but let's talk about insurance. So your first insurance policy is your emergency fund. Even if it pays you no interest, it's your emergency fund. I know I have all my VAT there. I know I have my income tax there. I know I've got a smoothing account there. This didn't happen overnight. I had to learn this, and you can as well if you haven't got it. The actual most important insurance that a self-employed person can have, whether you're running for a company or you're Schedule D, is income protection, right? So I'm 51 years of age. I don't have to work anymore, but I still have income protection policy that will pay me £40,000 tax-free if I cannot do this job for more than 3 months because I'm ill or disabled or somehow got an illness, okay? 40 grand for the next 15 years, tax-free, index-linked. And it costs me £1,200 a month. Sorry, £1,200 a year. That's £100 a month. Now, I think that's money for old rope. I mean, I'm a pretty fit 51-year-old, but when you're in your 50s, you've got more chance of something happening to you than when you're in your 20s or 30s. But here's the thing. If something's going to go wrong with you as a self-employed person, okay, it's not the 1 or 2 weeks or the month off, or even if you've got COVID, God forbid it, for 6 weeks. It's going to be something more substantial, and you have a year off of work and can't work, the hole it can blow in your finances when you haven't built wealth and you have still got mortgages and you've still got obligations and dependents, that's a real problem. So income protection insurance is where you are offloading the risk of you being unable to earn an income in the event of illness, disability, or some other incapacity, okay, until you either get better or the retirement age you put. So I put 67 on mine, so mine will run for another 16 years. What's not to like? And that's £100 a month for me for 40 grand a year. And that's my ISA allowance, so I can always keep putting the money into that. That's the way I look at it. But you might need less or more. And life insurance, either you need a term policy for loans and lump sum stuff, or you need a family income benefit policy to pay your family that income that they wouldn't be getting if you were dead. Okay, if you run a limited company, then a relevant life policy often is much better for you because you can get full tax deduction on the life policy and it's not a benefit in kind. But you can find more. Don't bother buying critical illness. I know some people have claimed on it. If you get cancer, heart attack, stroke, you do not need it, okay? The chances of you getting it, you need income protection if you get one of those things, but you don't necessarily... Critical illness is just too expensive when you think of all the other things you've got. I mean, fair enough if you want to waste your money, but I don't believe critical illness is worth having more than having income protection. And no cars through businesses, no cars on finance. You buy your cars with the money you've got. And you can, as a self-employed person, claim mileage of 45p a mile, up to 10,000 miles a year. It's a bit less, 25p a mile over that. And that's a full tax. So if you 10,000 miles at 45p, that's 4.5 grand you can take off your profits. I mean, crikey, what's not to like? And here's the other thing, public liability insurance that includes also business interruption. So let's just have a look at some of these things here. Here we go. Tamsin agrees with me on critical illness. Tamsin is a fantastic financial advisor who deals with divorcees. Absolutely superb lady based in Manchester. And if she says I'm right, then that means something because she's a very, very tough lady. She teaches financial planning. Any recommendations for companies that do insurance for self-employed? Good question. I'm not familiar with like who's the best in this. I'm just thinking we use Zurich for ours, but you know we go through a broker because we've got different risks and stuff we're doing. I would suggest that you find a decent general insurance broker. Don't try and do all this stuff on the cheap. For our rental properties and business properties, we use Direct Line for that. We've just found them to be very good there. So very good. Oh, Bouncy Castle. Yeah, hi, good to see you. Nice to see you. So let's just go. I want to go just... No, I'm going to come back to that question you asked earlier about pensions in a minute. So let's just talk a quick thing about tax, right? So tax. So there's two things. There's the tax year, which we know goes to the 5th of April. But normally, a self-employed person or a company has its own year end, and the profits are assessed to that year end. And most people's year end is the end of March. So this is a really good time to be thinking about tax issues. Now, here's the thing. You need two things. You need a good bookkeeper, as I said before, so all your records are up to date and you're ready to go quickly and you can see from your reports where you are, and that will give you an idea of your profit and loss and stuff. And you need a decent accountant. Now, a good accountant is someone who understands accounting, not necessarily tax planning, but they do have some ideas and understanding. If you've really complex affairs and you're really earning a lot of money, then you also need a chartered tax advisor. A chartered tax advisor may or may not be within your accountancy firm. Good accountants aren't always good tax planners. So if you're really earning six-figure money or you've got very complex affairs, a chartered tax advisor, I've spent thousands over the years on a good chartered tax advisor, and I've used a firm in Tunbridge Wells for years. They're not taking on clients anymore, but found them to be very, very good, but only when the situation needs it. But here's the thing about your company or your self-employed trading year end. You can move it forward or back once every 6 years. So you can extend it, push it out beyond March if your profits are falling, or shorten it if your profits are rising. And there's ways that you can then manipulate, because you might be having a one-off year, whether the profits are falling or rising. So speak to your accountant about that. And there's something else called the annual investment allowance. Basically, other than cars and a few other exceptions, you can spend and get 100% relief on spending things that you use in your business, not on cars. Because the car allowance is what I've said to you, 45p a mile for that. Now, another thing about, just touch on VAT. VAT, if most of your customers are VAT registered, then you might as well register for VAT, as long as the bookkeeping you're going to do anyway, and as long as it's not too complicated to do it. And I'm VAT registered through my speaking business, and I've registered on that before I hit the threshold for having to register, because it meant I could claim back VAT on everything I was paying. On my construction business, all the VAT I've incurred on building a house, that's all VAT registered. I get a check every month. I get not a check, an electronic payment from the Inland Revenue every month on my payment out. Okay, it's a little bit of work, but so what? Don't pay more VAT than you need to. Very, very important. And obviously, things like you can employ your partner as long as they're doing some work. My wife has always been our head of marketing. She's not very good, but she's... Alex, I'll come and answer your question in a minute. Yeah, she's not very good, my wife, but, we've kept her on. We've kept her paying her over the years. And, sometimes you have to make staff redundant as well. That's a good one, because when you make them redundant, because there's no more work, and this is a great time, isn't it, to be making people redundant in your business, you can be paying them up to $30,000 tax-free as long as it's not contractually in their contract, okay? So there's lots of angles there. Mobile phones for all your staff, as long as they're made out to the company. So let's now touch quickly on pensions before I get to some of the questions. Pensions. Now, let's assume that we're not going to get a state pension, right? Because most of us are going to be 100 by the time we get it. But if we can do something small to potentially still have our state pension, we should do that. So if we're self-employed Schedule D, then we need to pay Class 2 national insurance, and that gets us credits towards to our state pension. If we're employed as well and we're paying Class 1, we don't necessarily always have to pay Class 2. You have to take advice from your accountant depending on your turnover, because your Class 1 is giving you credit. So the most important thing there is that each year that you're paying Class 1 or Class 2 for your self-employment, you'll pay Class 1 if you're running for a company, and Class 2 if you're self-employed. That's giving you a credit towards your state pension. And it's $9,000. For me it's 67, for you guys it'll probably be your 80 or whatever, but it's still something to have. But here's the interesting thing is, don't underestimate the small cost it is for the state pension, and it's worth having. And it's the same with your partner. If you've got a partner who's not working, then they'll only get state pension entitlement if they're claiming child benefit for a child under the age of 12. But thereafter, paying them a little bit of money through the business and perhaps some national insurance, a little bit of national insurance might be what you need to do to give them credits towards their state pension if they're not working full time. So let's just talk about building up money for when we want to make paid work optional, right? Let's assume you're not going to sell your business for a big payoff, that you're going to just take money out as you go. So what should you do? Should you put money in a normal personal pension, Or should you put it in something like a lifetime ISA? All right. Or should you put it in something else? Well, look, personal pension is up to 40,000, subject to you earning that amount. So you can put the lower of 100% of your earnings, or £40,000. So if you earned 60,000, you can only put 40,000 in, unless you didn't do that in the last 3 years. So it is potentially possible for someone to put £160,000 into a pension in 1 year if they didn't put anything in for the last 3 previous years other than this one, okay? But you'd have to have 160 grand of earnings to justify it. Your pension contribution always has to equal your earnings in the year that you make the contribution. But the beauty is you get basic rate tax relief and higher rate if you're a high rate taxpayer. So that's a good thing. And the other good thing about pensions, a pension pot, is that it's not in your estate for inheritance tax, as long as you did it, you didn't know you were ill and you weren't just stuffing it full of pension just before you died. And it's not normally available to bankruptcy. The trustee in bankruptcy. Very important. A lifetime ISA is in your estate for inheritance tax and is available generally to a trustee in bankruptcy. The reason, why would you use a LISA versus a pension, a personal pension? Well, you'd probably use it if you were a basic rate taxpayer, you were under 40 and you'd never owned a house before and you were thinking at some stage in the future of buying a house. You put your first 4 grand into a lifetime ISA, okay? And the reason for it is because you can keep the bonus the government gives you. Your 4 becomes 5,000, and that is, if you use it towards your deposit on buying your first home, then you can use it. It's not a problem. And then put the rest into a pension. But if you're a higher rate taxpayer, or you're over 40, or you've owned a house before, your pension probably should be your first port of call. And it's actually quite good not to be able to put your hands on it until you're getting near to retirement. And currently, you can get your hands on a personal pension at 55, but it's actually going to be tied with 10 years before the state pension age. And here's another thing about pensions. Don't put any money into pensions until you've got your business stable and you've done money milestones 1, 2, and 3. So there we go. That's a firestorm there. Let's now look at some of the questions we got here. All right, so Tennis for Teddington. Is a pension still a good idea when there's no employer contribution? Would holding a property be a better investment? Well, property's a great investment, okay? It all depends what you want to do. The problem with property is that you have to borrow, don't you? You have to borrow, and I'm not keen on people borrowing. It's a leveraged investment. A property is a business, and it comes with other often not understood risks and costs. So a friend of mine, he's been renting out a property not too far from here, and the lady who was renting it, very nice lady with a single child, he gave a notice and said he wanted her out. She then has not paid the rent for the last 8 months. And basically it's because she has to be sort of evicted and be made homeless, so the council will then find her accommodation. But in the meantime, he's lost 8 months worth of rent, loads of grief, and he's still got to pay a mortgage on it. So he's really been hammered. So don't think property is a one-way bet. The thing about pension is if it's invested properly into something like Global Equity Index Fund or some sort of a range of different asset classes, is you don't have to worry too much about it because you're not going to touch it for years. It's the do it and forget. So I'm not saying don't do property. You can in fact buy commercial property in your own pension by using either a self-invested pension, or if you've got a company, you can use a small self-administered scheme. Quite complex. You can borrow as well. You can you can borrow out of the scheme as well. So there's lots of things you can do there, but try not to be too clever until you've got the basics right. So the answer is yes, property is a good investment, whether it's commercial or whether it's residential, but it doesn't come without some grief, with some costs and some substantial risks. Let's have a look here now. Let's have a look. And just one other thing, if there's no employer contribution, it still makes sense to make a pension contribution, okay, if you're a high rate taxpayer, because what else can you do and get high rate tax? So all of those profits that you're earning that are pushing you into high rate tax, it's not going to be around forever. And if you do have the monies available, and this year you are likely to pay high rate tax, and it's not going to deplete your emergency fund, I would be putting money in. I mean, I'm stuck at the moment. I can't put any more money in pensions. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying it's the fact. I can't put any more in, so that's no good to me. I wish I could, but I can't. So I would make hay while the sun shines. Let's have a look at any other questions we've got here. Okay. How do you plan long-term with this uncertainty? This is from Alec Baldwin. How do you plan long-term with the uncertainty of COVID and risk of my wife working on temp contracts? Well, what you do, Alex, I don't know if you heard at the beginning when I talked about cash flow, this is a problem when you have variable income or you think things are going to get worse. Okay, so this is what I would do. Depends where you are on the money milestone. So if you've built an emergency fund and you've got rid of your debt, then as far as I'm concerned, what you can do is you can actually just pause everything else. You don't have to keep putting money into pensions. I would be probably reining in my money and building my cash up. So if you were putting money into your personal pension, I don't want you to stop it. But if you really are worried and you feel that a bigger cash buffer would help you sleep well at night and also weather this cash flow storm, then pile up cash, pile up cash, pile up cash. So it really depends. If you've got no emergency fund, put the money into building that up. If it was 3 months, make it 6 months. If it's 6 months, perhaps make it 9 months or even 12 months. So I would just be a bit more defensive. I would avoid taking on any expenses that you can't get out of. Certainly no debts, no loans, etc. I would be looking to get out of big lumpy cars that are on finance. You can get out of them without penalty. Just get rid of the puppy. Because when everyone heads for the door, wants to get rid of their big lumpy Audi, whatever it is, or their Mercedes, or their whatever they've got, then you're going to be at the back of the queue. So if you get now, while the market's still quite strong to sell cars, this is only because you want to be defensive, right? You just strip everything down. You trim everything back. You plan as if there's a war happening, okay? That's what I would do. That's what I have done in the past. I went from driving around in a beautiful Mercedes many, many years ago. I kid you not, and I was driving around in a small 3-door Citroen that looked like it had been in the Second World War, all right? I drove the car that I could afford because I was worried about the future. I trimmed everything right back. And actually, it turns out I didn't need to do that, but I felt so much better. So always plan for the worst and hope for the best. And the other thing about the work situation is if your wife's on working on temp contracts, might your wife think about changing how she's working, where she's working, what she's doing? Is there something she can do and be on the front foot with that? Let's have a look here. What else here? Do you think electric cars are worthwhile given they're tax deductible? Well, I don't do anything for tax purposes. I mean, I think electric cars are a good thing, right? Eventually, when they can be doing all the clean generation of them, I've just put a charging point in the house that I built in the grounds of my property here, the holiday let. I think they're a great thing, but you only can buy the one that you can afford. Okay, so you buy the one that you can afford, and I would be buying secondhand because I just don't want to buy new. Simple as that. Who's that? Who? I hope she sees this video. Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Getting a state pension later than expected. Does that include the amount when you reduce your wages to increase your employer's contribution that is matched by the government? So Peter, I think I'm trying to understand the question on that one. Re-getting state pension later than expected. No, this is not the government tax relief that goes into your personal pension with any employer contributions, or if you're self-employed. This is a self-employed talk, right? So if you put in $4,000 and the government adds 1,000, that's $5,000. I'm not talking about that goes in your pot, and that you use that to provide whatever pension income withdrawal you want whenever you want. Currently from 55, but that's going up to 57. I'm talking about the state pension, which you get from paying national insurance contributions, Peter. So I'm not convinced that it will be available at 67. It's probably going to be 70. It might be 71. It could be $9,000. It could be $12,000. It could be $5,000. I'm saying do what you need to do, the minimum you need to get the credit, because you need to have 30 years worth of national insurance to get the maximum of whatever state pension whenever we get it. So do the minimum necessary, okay? But put what you can aside into whatever tax wrapper, a pension or a lifetime ISA or paying off a mortgage or a buy-to-let property to build up enough money so that work is optional for you. You do paid work because you want to. So I'm just talking there about the state pension. Don't bank on it. What are your views? So let's have a look here. Hopefully that answers your question. What are your views on the self-employed pensions that are being marketed now? I'm not sure, Tamzin, what you mean by the self-employed pension. I think what you're talking about is pension bee, and making a big thing with big billboards and adverts about you can flex and vary it. Emma Maslin, fantastic money coach. She is a big fan of them, and she says the flexibility it gives them is great. I'm not so sure it's a big issue, right? Most people who are self-employed can put 50, 60, 100 quid a month in a pension and then save the money elsewhere. And then towards the end of the tax year, when they know how the year's gone, when they know how COVID's turning out, when they know if their partner's going to be continuing on their contracts, you can then put a bit more money. I just put a lump of money, not in my pension because I can't put any more in it, but I've just put a lump of money in my charitable account. I'm a big keen giver to charity. And I've just done that now. I had a look round and I thought, okay, well, I've got this cash, I've got that cash. I'm assuming nothing else comes in. I'm going to put this lump into there. It's the same with your pension. I'm not so sure this variable thing is all it's cracked up to be. I mean, put a small amount in a month that you know you can do come what may as part of that core expenditure, and just top up at the end of the year or whenever you feel comfortable to release the funds from your cash pot. That's what I would do. Everything else is marketing. What else? Hopefully that answer your question. Reworking up emergency fund as we used it on Monarch House a couple of years ago. Alex, yeah, good idea. So no shame in using an emergency fund for an emergency. But an emergency is not doing up your house. And I'm not having a go at you. I'm saying that is not what it's for. You don't touch the emergency fund because sure as eggs is eggs, you've done the house up and then the boiler goes wrong or your car breaks down. So you might well go from a 6-month emergency fund to 3 months and perhaps use the excess on the house. I could cope with that, but certainly not using anything to do up houses or go on holidays or upgrade the car from anything below 3 months. And certainly not if your outlook looks a bit dodgy. So let's have a look. Good stuff. Well, look, okay. I've seen a few companies advertising self-employed. I don't think people are realising paying it. Yeah, okay. It's marketing, Tamsin. Good. Look, okay. Hopefully that's been of use. If you've liked that, okay, let your friends know. Come back next week when we'll be discussing something else. But here's the thing about financial planning for self-employed, right? You do have unique challenges, the cash flow, the uncertainty, the variability, the slightly more complex situation on the tax and your benefits. But you also have loads of opportunity, right? You have if you get your system set up, and it's all about automating, delegating, outsourcing, leveraging technology and being intentional, and put a little bit of time aside each month to do this. I have to do the same. But you've got lots of opportunity to create lots of value in the world and get paid well for that value. And I think this nation of ours was built on the back of entrepreneurs, of self-employed people, of tradespeople, of people getting up every day, despite what's going on, and still turning up, showing up, and delivering value. And, I commend you. You're not on your own. I've got a lot of respect for the self-employed. I've got a lot of respect for everyone, but particularly people who haven't got the final salary pensions and who've got the cloak of someone else paying them if they're ill. But, take care of the basics, and then the world is your oyster. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's been great having you on. Thanks for your questions. Love you all. Really appreciate your time. I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.